we had the opportunity to talk to William Washington, who has this kind of incredible story of trauma and abuse and then really loss, followed by redemption, not only for himself, but trying to find redemption for other people.
Yeah, he is somebody whose story I first heard through the radio station where I have a show, and one of my colleagues works with him at the Bridge Ministry, which is about 45 minutes outside of Charlottesville. It's an 18-month program that works with men with addiction issues, but it tries to go further than the typical, rehab or inpatient treatment in that it's comprehensive and holistic, and he's having so much success.
And he's running this as an alternative to incarceration, basically saying, hey, rather than sticking somebody in jail where nothing's going to change, where they're not going to be given any new skills or tools, let's get them to a place where they can actually heal, they can become different people, they can learn new ways to live, and they have a really high success rate.
Yeah, and I think a big part of his success is the fact that he himself came out of this horrific situation as a child and a young person, and then spent years in the system struggling with his own issues of addiction and just lack of support. And then he got some support. And when he got what he needed and he was able to turn his own life around, he wanted to pull everybody up behind him. He was one of those people you've talked about who just wants to save everybody.
Yeah, and it's, I've said this before, but there are people who, when they're hurt, they go and they hurt other people. They kind of spread the pain around. And there are people, when they're hurt, they want to save everybody else from having to experience that pain. And he's one of those people. And I love the authenticity from which he can speak. Because he can speak as someone who is incarcerated. He can speak as someone who's been shot. He can speak as someone who's experienced great trauma. He can speak as somebody who's struggled. He can also now speak as someone who's been successful for a number of years and who's found a way to help other people. And there's nothing to a person who's in the struggle like somebody who's been there and can speak from that experience, but also talk about the way out.
And he's also managed to bridge worlds. So the people like the judge in his case is somebody he's built a deep friendship with, and people that the judge knows have then turned and seen the work he's doing, and he's gotten so much support financially so that he can build this program, which we went out and saw the campus. It's really an impressive place, and they are doing education and they are doing counseling and they're doing all kinds of things for people who have never had a situation like that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't really understand or struggle to understand the experiences of many people who end up in jail and prison. People who end up in the depths of addiction don't end up there because they want to be, because it's like the path they choose in life. It's usually a response, and it's usually a response to trauma. So going to a place that actually gives them a safety and a place to heal and the tools they need to heal, to me is the most revolutionary thing, and it's what incarceration should be about. But since we're not doing it in the system, we have a place that says, hey, rather than doing that, that basically nothing that you're doing there, we're going to do everything here, and we're going to give people a chance.
Yeah, he's the subject actually of a new film called A Bridge to Life by a Charlottesville filmmaker named Chris Farina, who just heard the story, met William Washington, and was so inspired he wanted to sort of showcase the work that he's doing. And one of the things the film asks him about is the fact that faith is a part of his personal story. It is a part of the program, but it's not a prerequisite, and it's not a place where people are going and he's trying to convert. He's just trying to, offer the support he felt he received through that faith, but also show people that there's hope, sort of in general, no matter what you believe.
I don't have particular religious leanings, but I've been helped by people who do, of all different faiths. And what I found is a common factor. Someone who wants to help other people without asking anything in return, that really seems like what he's doing. He is spending his life helping other people. So whatever you call that, whatever that comes from, whatever you label that in your own life, I don't care. It means you're helping people, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah. It was a great conversation we had with him. It was really interesting and inspiring to hear firsthand what he lived through and then what he's tried to do for the last, really, I guess, nearly 30 years.
Yeah. So it was a great interview. We hope you'll listen. We hope you'll enjoy. And I just feel lucky to know people like him, and I feel lucky that we have people like him in our community.
I agree. William, it's so great to be sitting here with you. Thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah. So you have a long story, mostly based around Charlottesville, both from when you were growing up, the things you went through, and the work you're doing now. Can you give us a little snapshot of what your childhood looked like in Charlottesville or in this Central Virginia area?
Well, I raised up in Fluvanna County, and raised up on a farm. And it was a big farm, and my grandfather was a coal miner, and grandmother who came from the city, and both of them had different backgrounds. My grandfather was Caucasian, my grandmother was Native American, and of course my father was different. And we raised up in a very structured and disciplined family. Well, once my father reached the age of 15 years old, he he met my mother. And he made a decision. Back then, they used to get married early. And he married my mother. My grandfather disagreed with the marriage, and because of that, it became an instant separation. And my father, who was very close to his family, really affected him. And the way he started to dealing with the rejection, it was through alcohol. And he became a chronic alcoholic. After many years, so about 15 years or so, I was born, and at the age of 14, my father used to come in late at night. He was a track and trailer driver, and he came in one night when me and my baby sister were having a disagreement. And when he walked through the door, she was have taken my tablet back from her, and she was just having pretty much a fit. She was screaming and hollering just because she wanted the tablet back. And my father walked through the door, and he was intoxicated. He said, asked me what was going on. I told him. And he said, give the tablet back. And for the first time, I said to my father, no. And he pulled out his gun and shot me. And they rushed me to the hospital, and I got through that moment, came back home. But from that, I couldn't, every time I got around my father, it was, and I understand it today, the mental health part of it today, but it's just, I was just like paralyzed. Anytime he came around me, I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe, everything changed. And one day I just made a decision to run away from home at the age of 14.
Well, I mean, this is a different world, because in modern day, if someone were to shoot their child, you wouldn't assume they would go back to that household. Was this just a matter of there was nobody kind of watching over, or this was just understood, or there was an explanation or an excuse? How were you sent back to that home after your own father shot you?
Well, I love my father. I love my father dearly. And when we went to the hospital, they asked me what happened. And I told them I was cleaning the gun.
Okay.
So when I went back, my father was the provider.
Yeah.
The only provider. And I was not going to take that away from my family or my mother. So, but the way to deal with all of it, in my understanding, is to run away. And when I did, I came to Charlottesville, and it was on Main Street when I arrived. And I come to find out things were a little different raising up in the country than the city. So I started looking for people that looked like me on the outside, the community. In my community, we provided for each other. We took care of each other. And when I went over to that community, it was nothing, it was completely different. So I went from what they call Blue Ridge Commons to West Haven. And I was rejected there, so I went back to Main Street, and that's where all that bad activity was at. Drugs, and people was picking up drugs and just doing a lot of bad things. And the older gentleman came up to me, and he could see I was in need, and he could see his opportunity. And he said to me, asked me where I was from. I told him. He said, you know anybody? I said, no. And he said, are you hungry? I said, yes. He said, I'll tell you what I do. If you take this to the cars that pull up and give it to them, bring the money back to me, at the end of the day, I will give you a meal. And I said, okay. So that started out like that, and I got used to doing it, used to providing for myself like that, and I got caught up in the cycle. And things got very intense, so started getting in trouble with the law and all the things that started happening, and it went from like 3 months to 6 months, from 6 months to 3 years, from 3 years to 5, from 5 to 7, from 7 to 17.
Those were the sentences you were
Yes.
getting. What was and you didn't serve the 17-year sentence?
No, I didn't. I served a very small portion of that time. And when I went into the system, I started learning about programs. And I heard about a program called New Life for Youth. And that program would deal with, 18-month program, deal with addiction. And I asked to go into that program. And that's how I met Judge Sweat. So I had the chance to go back after I was sentenced the 17 years, and I asked to go back to court to get a chance for a program. And the first court, it was two different courts, it was Fluvanna and Charlottesville, so I had two different charges there. And when I went to Fluvanna, at the end, the judge started to kind of making a joke about the program. And I was sitting, I said, well, so much for that, this is over with. And at the end, he said, well, I'm not gonna make the decision. I'm gonna see you in Charlottesville. And when I went to Charlottesville, I went before a judge called Judge Sweat. And he was sitting there on the bench, and I got my chance to speak. And the Commonwealth job is to protect the community, so he wanted me to serve the time. And I said, got up there, and the Commonwealth was saying he don't deserve a chance, he need to serve this time, he'd been in trouble before, all true. And I got my chance to speak, and I got up and I said, Your Honor, everything he said is true. And that's things he don't know about. But nevertheless, I believe if you give me this chance, I believe I have enough in my foundation that I can build something by the grace of God and change my life. And he looked at me for what seems to be a very long time. And he said, I'm gonna give you the chance. But if you come back here jaywalking, you're gonna serve all your time.
Yeah.
And he gave me the chance, and I went into a program called New Life for Youth. And it was all about working. And what I learned about that program is about working, allow your mind to move into places out of addiction. So the work became like a mental health support system that let me start to thinking and living in a different way. And it changed my life. And of course, my faith was strong. I believe in the impossible. And I was the impossible. So I needed that faith. And I started to applying it, not just believing that I could change, but doing things to show that I will change. And I put those two together.
Was that when you were, well, first of all, how old were you when you went into the program?
I was 23 years old.
And those things you say, talking about putting things into motion, was that while you were in the program or after you got out?
Well, I was in the program because I personally, I believe it starts in the program. So many times you see guys in the system and you kind of go through the system, and then just before 30 days they get out, they focus saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and trying to change their ways, and they get out and they come right back. I think it starts within. I think the victory is when you overcome where you at. It's not so much where you want to go. And that's what I did.
Because you were a 14-year-old kid who'd been shot by a member of his own family, who had worked on a farm, so you obviously had some discipline, but you didn't have any opportunities, you didn't have any direction, and it makes sense. You got into the thing that was going to feed you, that was going to keep you safe, that was going to keep you in a spot. So there's this whole idea of crime being like malice or being evil or you were just surviving. You were a kid. And it was 9 years between then and when you finally got that chance. And in those 9 years, were you given any programming or any support or any of the things that you needed to be able to kind of turn your life around?
No, not only was given anything, didn't know how to ask for it.
Yeah.
I was just lost, and I remember times when I stood before the judge and he said, I'm going to let you go home, and this is what I want you to do. I want you to get a job. I want you to be faithful to the family. I don't want you to break the law. I want you to pay restitution. I want you to pay child support. And I'm sitting before him, just nodding, not listening, just yes. I just want to get out of that moment. And when I walk out of the door of the court, stand in front and just stop and say to myself, how in the world I'm going to do that? I have no idea how to do that. So in that moment, if I had enough courage, I would went back into the courtroom and said to the judge, I just lied to you, and everything that you asked me to do, not only I can't do it, I don't even know how to do it. Yeah. But, I never went back.
But so in the program you went to, did they assume that you didn't know? Did they just basically say, hey, you don't have to ask for it. We're going to give you these skills. We're going to give you these topics. We're going to give you these conversations. How did that happen? And how were you open to it in that moment?
Well, the program, even the program today, Bridge Ministry, I use a lot of those tools that I learned in the program. And they start at step one. They don't take for granted that you have anything to offer. Mm-hmm. We start with our room, keeping our room in order, sweeping our floor, folding our clothes, making sure our socks in the right place. And then we graduate from there. So it's almost, they start you out with success. Mm-hmm. So when you come to those moments that seem like it's too tough, you always can look back at what you have accomplished to push you forward. But they do not, they don't focus on your gifts. They focus on what the program start to building a sense of integrity of what you can and what you can't eventually, and that works together to build something unique.
Okay.
So when you came out of the program that you'd been in, I'm just doing the math, you're 24, 25 mm-hmm. at that point. What did you do when you came out? I mean, did you get a job, and how did you start giving back to others?
Well, thanks for asking that question, because during that time, NAAA, OAR, Region 10, they have just begun. And I remember Region 10 was on East Mark, and they was in a basement, and they had 2 employees. Wow. And they had no idea what they was doing, but they wanted to help. So what I did, I knew I had to create something for myself. And in order to do that, I started giving my life away. And giving my life away, I started building a structure that I not only to help people, but I truly was helping myself. Mm-hmm. I found that fellowship. When I got off from work, I would go in those areas, the guys I was working with was clean, and we would just sit around and talk. That was our NAAA, because NAAA back then, the majority was middle class, upper class setting, and they did not want their clients in the room, sure. Which is some of them was lawyers and some were judges. So it was very difficult. So I created that, and then eventually it was so clear there were so many, my God, was in need. And it touched my heart to a place that I found myself weeping and just like, what are we gonna do? I'm just a drop in the bucket. There's so many. And I opened my home up. I put all my kids together in one room. I took the other room and started to bring guys in, let them sleep there. Found them jobs. So I get up at 5:30, I take them to work. Then I go to work, go back and pick them up, and we come home together. We have group meetings, and they live with me until we found my place.
I mean, that's incredible. And you were working too with the jail, right? You were.
Yes.
Because I heard in the movie A Bridge to Life, which people should watch because it does a great job of showing the work you're doing there. I loved hearing the story of what you were doing and Judge Sweat finding out. How did you two come back together?
Well, Judge Sweat was, should I say, he was at a place that he was given many opportunities, but he didn't see the benefit of the success. Mm-hmm. And he heard about what I was doing. I had become the assistant chaplain at the jail. I was one of the chaplains at UVA for the basketball and football team. So I was, people was recognizing the gifts that was being developed, and it was using them, and I wanted to be used. And he heard about this, and I was in the courtroom one day testifying for one of the guys to take him to the program that I went through. And the bailiff told him, that's William Washington. This is the guy you gave a chance, and now he's going around talking about the testimony of what you did. And he asked the bailiff to ask me to come back to his chambers. And again, you know, when a judge, when you have been through that process and a judge asks you to come back to your chambers, for me, it was not an exciting moment. I was very, very afraid. I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure that everything is clear, but when I got there, and he started to talking to me, and you could see there was a need in him, and there was a need within me. I needed more. I needed to move out of the realm I'm in, and in order to really to be that next level of servant, I needed men like Jade around me. So we just started talking, and we found a common goal in that moment that we knew. It was not a long time, but it was so clear. I wanted to spend time with him. And I think he wanted to spend time with me. So he invited me to a men's group they had at their church at First Presbyterian on Park Street. And he asked me to come. And when I came, you know, they was asking the question about diversity. And they was at a place that the group and their people that they are affiliated with, the diversity that they was talking about was not there. And they was asking me how to accomplish that. And I have never worked to build diversity based on the color of my skin. That have come from just loving people, caring for people. And that's a natural thing for me. It's all around me, you know. I don't have many sit at my table, didn't look like me, and likewise my family. And I started sharing that with them. And from that, we started to breaking bread together. They started coming over to my home. We would have men's group, and he would bring his friends, I would bring mine. So at any given time, you have the judge and the guy who just came out of the courtroom with issues, and he was overseeing the case. So we just started building relationship. Went on mission trips together, helping people. You know, the way you help yourself, I believe you help others. And we started doing that and just became very close. And he's no longer just the judge that gave me the opportunity. He's one of my closest friends.
And do you feel like those relationships, would you be where you are and would you be having the impact you're having if it wasn't for those relationships like the one you have with Judge Sweat?
I could not accomplish, no. Jay, I had zeal, hope, I had a vision. Jay and his friends made it a reality.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you suddenly get into this bigger place, and I don't know if it's the same for you, but when I came home from prison, a lot of the work I was doing, it was survivor's guilt. It was like, I got out and they didn't. These people deserve this. They work just as hard. I want to see them succeed. Mm-hmm. And it drove me probably in an unhealthy way. Like I was doing good work, but I was also doing it at the point of exhaustion. And did they kind of balance you out and give you a path? And then what did that path look like? How did you move forward in a way to help the most people and live a life of service?
For the first 5 to 7 years, I was very rebellion. And they knew it. I had men around me that was very successful. They have accomplished a lot. And finally one day, I remember Gary Green, close friend, sat down and was talking to me. He said, William, I know you have something to offer, but you have this wealth of knowledge around you and experience. And you have to take advantage of this. And he said it in a way that I could hear it. And the next 3 to 4 years is a statement we use in the bridge is head down, heart up. I started listening, started learning. And they wanted to give me that knowledge. They just started pouring it in. In some cases, it was probably a little too much. But nevertheless, it's what I live on today. the integrity, the structure. I didn't have that. That came from them. And now I have my own, but it started out with those who are around me.
So can we just talk a little bit about the bridge, where it is now? Because from the start of you just taking men who are struggling into your own home, now with this help of the men's group, Judge Sweat and his friends, it has grown into something that must be maybe not beyond your wildest dreams, but something that you could have only dreamed of when you first started. So can we just talk a little bit about what it is and what it does?
Yes. It's an 18-month program. We deal with life-controlling issues, and which is just not addiction, abuse, rejection. All these things motivate the addiction. So over the years, I've learned how not just to focus on one. The addiction is real. It's real, but it's secondary. The primary is what is the fuel, and that's what we go up today. The things that really cause that addiction to stay alive. Because when you just focus on the addiction, it's hard to overcome, and that's why they're saying recovery, because addiction cannot be defeated, because I don't believe it's real.
I want to ask you about that, because that is something that you are not aligned with a lot of the literature, a lot of the theories or thought. So yeah, tell me about that.
I respect it. When someone come in and saying, I have an addiction problem, I respect it, I serve that. But then I show him, I find that place that keeps that addiction alive. And eventually, when they leave out of our program, when they go through the 18 months, they don't talk about addiction no more. They talk about their behavior. And that behavior, once they get it in order, they don't have no desire for drugs. They don't focus on it. It's just free from it. And yes, if you want to start with addiction, it's going to be there. But if you focus on what is really causing you to give up your life, to walk away, to throw away your opportunity, I don't believe drugs do that. I believe the individual does that. So let's talk about, why are you doing that? Why you think that somehow to do drugs, to use that as the reason that you want to throw away everything you work for, your life, your opportunity, and when we find that place, we don't find addiction, we find behavior. And I have never, in the 33 years of service, I have never helped a man to overcome his problem, focus on addiction. It's always been behavior.
Well, there's a line that says the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection. And one of the things I remember, we came out for the dedication of the new building at the Bridge, and I saw the men in your program, as well as some of the staff, and the familiarity and the comfort, and they seemed like a community. I haven't seen that. I mean, I saw that a little bit in jail, but it was like kind of tighter. In prison, you still have those odds. It looked like people were comfortable, they cared about each other, they loved each other, and you've created a place where they can have that community. And I know in my own experience, like, that's where I heal. I don't heal in isolation in a room away from everybody else. Right. I heal in community with other people. Exactly. And you've created something. I just thought that was really beautiful.
Well, thank you. That's the goal. We're family. Yeah, and those guys are part of my family. When they walk in, they're no longer an inmate, or we use the word program, but they don't call it a program. This is where I stay. We don't go to a child hall, we go to a kitchen. Our property is not a yard. It's a place where it's just a place where we fellowship and do things together. We don't have bunks, we got a dorm, we have beds. And the gate stays open. So it makes the world a difference. So how they see the program is eventually how they're going to see themselves.
100%.
So you talked about the different view of addiction and the focus on behavior rather than addiction. What about the role of trauma? I mean, you certainly have this enormous history of trauma in your childhood that you have worked through. I'd like to hear about that, but also how you see trauma playing a role in some of the issues that people have.
Yes. It's major. If I could put a percentage on it, I'd probably say about 60% of my students that come in dealing with trauma. So we have very professionals that come there from background from Harvard that know how to work in these areas. One-on-one classes, we have the group counseling, we have one-on-one counseling, behavioral health. All those tools together, they really work. And the peace is the best program we have. Getting along with each other, very peaceful. We're away from everything. 17.3 acres in the heart of a 200-acre park where you have a lot of animals around and whatnot, but nevertheless, very peaceful. And that peace helped them to quieten their spirit and start to hearing that noise inside. And then now they can define what it's saying. At first, it was just noise. And the way they dealt with that noise is the addiction. That's how you quieten it down. So really, it's not the addiction is the problem. It's the tool to deal with those broken pieces on the inside. So we go after the broken pieces, not what seems to be. I believe the addiction, if I can put it in a more simple term, the addiction is the magnified problem. It's the problem that everybody sees and saying that's it. But the true problem is what's hidden. And it takes love, patience, and a lot of work to get to those hidden places.
Ask you, you said something about the quiet and nature, and I know I go down to a horse rescue in Arkansas. When I'm down there, I have more peace and more quiet and more clarity in my life than anywhere else. But then I come back to Charlottesville or DC or New York and I get in the mix. How do you have your guys carry that kind of peace or that perspective, that clarity with them as they come back into the world?
Well, that's why the 18 months. Okay. I believe we could accomplish the tools probably in about 6 months. The other 6 is really learning how to guard, to protect, to embrace, and to know it belongs to you and you have the right to keep it. So we just go through process and those moments of working with each other. Those moments when you have a roommate and he sees things different than the way you see them. And you use that peace in those moments to build a relationship, to stand even times when things is not right and you have to stand for what is right. And by doing that on the property for 6 months, it helped them when they move, they know that they have earned that. It belongs to them. It's not something that you read in the book and you can do. They have taken ownership of it and now they can apply it. So again, I believe it starts on the property. The true victory is in the program. And we live what we have accomplished in the program once we get out.
And just for clarity, because you said 18 months and then you said 6 and 6. So how much time is spent on that property and how much time is spent back in Charlottesville in your other facility?
It's a 3-phase. The first 6 months is all about learning the program. Okay. You learn how it operates and the things that we offer, the classes. The last 6 months, which is 12 months on the property, a year on the property, it's about giving what you learn, applying it, seeing that it really works. And then the third phase, when you go back into the community and you got 6 months in what we call a transitional house, where you get a job, you get a bank account, you go through budget classes, you get new people, new places, new things. And we help you and slowly move you back into the community. So you got at least 18 months sobriety before your first day.
And why is the 18 months so important? So many programs, rehabs are 28 days, 30 days. I mean, I've heard some 90 days. And I know that you believe so firmly that it has to be longer than that.
Yes.
And I'd love to hear why.
Yeah, for the first 6 months when I was getting out of the jail system, going back in the community, I'll fall right back in 2 or 3 days. And it's not so much drugs, the way I think, the people I was around, all that is a part of the addiction. But it took 6 months to reveal that I was in trouble. So 6 months is just, we call 6 months first day, is when you start to giving it away. So in Bridge, 6 months, we call that first day. And then after that first day, you got 6 months to prove that you have received to yourself the discipline and the structure you need.
So you went through an 18-month program yourself.
Yes.
How much of the Bridge is based off that program, and what other sources do you draw the kind of structure of the Bridge program from your own experience?
About 30%.
Okay.
And back then, it was just all about just getting guys off the street and trying to do something to help. And it helped me. But I grew up on a farm, so I had a lot of discipline. I knew how to receive that information and apply it in a way that would be beneficial. You know, working in a garden teach you how to put a seed in, plant it properly, and wait for it to grow. So that information I was receiving, I applied it very quickly. Most of the guys around me didn't know how to do that.
Sure.
You know, but there was the mental health, there was the addictive behavior, there was the lack of structure, no skills, and that's what we do at the Bridge. You know, we have Piedmont College who comes in and teach certification. We have Southside who teach certifications, and that's a big part. Educating the mind to me is very important. You know, it's just not just, you know, stop doing drugs, but you have to replace it with something, something hopeful. And when a guy get out the jail system, you say, okay, we're gonna get you a job. We're gonna get you a job making $10 an hour. By the way, you're not gonna like the job. You're just working to pay your restitution. And at the end of the week, you're gonna have no money to put away. You got no hope. Eventually, they're gonna quit that job and go back. So in the Bridge, we give them 4 to 6 certifications. So at any given time, that's at least 4 different type of jobs. So they choose what they want. They choose a job that they really want to work. They're making, some making from $20 to $50 an hour. So now they can pay that restitution at the end of the week. They can see some benefit for themselves. All these tools are so important, you know, and that's what's missing, because they're moving from out of the system, but we're still treating them like they're still in the system. Yeah. They're my family, you know, and I want them to know that, not based on what I say to them, but what they see.
You talk about in the movie, A Bridge to Life, now, I don't know if it was reconciling, but reestablishing contact with your father and having a relationship later in his life. I am really curious about how that came about and how you were able to get to a place where that was possible.
Yes. Well, I was not at a place I was willing to receive my father, because I would still had the anxiety when I used to see him. Only thing I could think about in that moment, he was going to pull out a gun and shoot me again. And I know in my deep down with my heart that was not going to happen, but I had that feeling, and I didn't know how to get rid of it. So my father, because he was a chronic alcoholic, he got in trouble with the law, and he went over here to what they used to call Alma Joint Security Complex, and they called me up one day and said, my sister and I, and your father's dying. What do you want to do? And my sister and I, we made a decision to bring him home with us. And it was very difficult, but I knew, I believe in this. I believe you honor your parents so it go well with you. I really believe that. And even though he have not honored me, I believe until the day he died, it was my job to honor him. So I brought him in, and he came in with a lot of pills, and they said he's not going to last long. And I was giving him his pain pills, and that was an issue for me, you know. So I'm handling pain pills, and it's a slippery slope there. And I made a decision not to give him some of the pills, but just the pain pills, because I didn't understand why we was giving those pills to him if he was just had a few days left. Well, after a month, my father was still there. And then a few days later, probably about 35 to 40 days, he was sitting up in the bed and started walking around. And 10 years later, we were still together.
10 years later?
Yes.
Wow.
But during that time in my home, I got a chance to start to working with my father again. And I always wanted to love him again. I knew that. I always loved my father. You know, my father was just, he was like a king to me. I was raised like that you honor your mother and father. And I always wanted to find a way to get back to my father. And he started going to church with me. And he finally got strong enough. He got his own apartment. He met someone else. He started dating. He got married. He built him another home. He used to come by on Sundays and be with my family. He started being a grandfather. My kids loved him. My family just loved him. And we became very close. I got a chance to do things for him. Then he took him sick. He was a smoker, had throat cancer, and really sick. So no longer he could eat. So he had to be, his medicine, he had to be fed through a tube. And so 3 times out of a day, I would go to his house and leave Buckingham, go to Scottsville, and take care of him. And took care of his family, his wife, and made sure that everybody was okay. You know, took care of whatever they needed. My job was to take care of it. I did. Then it came a time that the sickness just overtook his body. And I get the call about 12 o'clock at night. He said, your father had passed away. And it was challenging. And as I was going there, you know, I didn't know what to expect. He was still there then. They haven't come to pick his body up yet. And when I walked in, I went into his bedroom. He was laying on the bed. He was laying there with the biggest smile. And I looked at him, and just this peace came over me. And I know that was left for me. And it was just saying it was his time and it was okay. So I not only have seen reconciliation with myself, with my family, but I've seen it with my father to a level that most people never seen before. And I needed that because something of all I was accomplishing, something still was missing. I could feel it. You know, it was this brokenness that wouldn't let me go. And when I went back to him, it just disappeared.
Did you ever discuss what happened? Did he ever tell you that he was sorry for shooting you? Or was there ever a discussion like that? Or was it just something that you understood between you?
My father was what we call old school. He would do things, and I know what it meant. He said it many times. Not verbally, but through his actions.
Those, you know, the kind of trauma we have with family that we love, that have loved us and provided for us, but also hurt us, it's one of the hardest things to get past. Did you have a blueprint for that? Or was that just you in that moment deciding, I'm going to show up regardless of what's happened, regardless of the anger or the pain, I'm just going to show up? And you found a way, you found your own path for it.
Yes. I think time sometimes will push us into the moment that we need. And I was ready. but I didn't know how to get there. And when I got that call, time played in my favor, because I knew I would never reach out to her. But there was something in me that was ingrained. Honor thy mother and father, so it will go well with you. That's been with me since a child. So when I got that call, that's the first thing I heard. I have to do this. And I needed to. And I wanted to. After I got in it, I really wanted to serve my father one more time.
So your story has been of your own redemption or your own second chance, of creating redemption opportunities or second chances for other people, and then also for your father, which is one of those things that a lot of people couldn't get past. What do you draw on, or what would you tell other people to draw on when they're facing this seemingly insurmountable challenge, or when they feel hopeless or they feel lost? What is it that allows you to get through, or that you give to other people so that they can get through?
Well, there come a time the pain will become an opportunity. And it don't happen quick. It don't happen quickly, excuse me. But it's there. And pain is a motivation for great change. And sometimes we focus more on the pain than the opportunity. And I found the opportunity. I wanted the opportunity. And by the grace of God, now I have the opportunity.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Anything else that you feel like you want to share with people that you think people should know, either about you personally or the bridge or resilience?
Yeah. When you look at the bridge, and it is, I think it's a ministry of example. But that example is the reflection of our community. Exactly what we're doing today. People that really care, taking time out and reaching out and taking time out to do this interview, making sure that voice is heard and go beyond the basic and the norm. So if I could share anything, I would say we did this together. We built the bridge, and we want to build more.
I don't think you could end on a better note than that.
I think that's great. One thing, just so we have this, we might want to use something. I know you've answered this question before, but I do want to ask it for this interview. Faith, religious faith, is clearly an important part of your story. It's part of the bridge, the fabric of the bridge. When you come in, I think there's a quote from the Bible. Is the bridge only for people who are Christian, or is it about trying to get people to convert to Christianity? What is the role of religion in the program as you see it?
It's not only, and we do not focus on trying to convert people to Christianity. The faith part of it is the impossibility to become possible. When you deal with addiction, addictive behavior, abuse, you have some impossible stories. And it truly takes faith to walk through it. So if they come in, we have faith to offer. If they just want the practical structure, they can have that. But when you look at faith, and if faith is forced, then faith is not real. Faith only can be accepted. And have to be the person that want it. So when someone come in and say, I want to be a part of the faith, we do our best to lead them, but only that individual can walk through the door. We get someone come in and say, I don't want to have nothing to do with the faith. That's just fine. Let's see how we can set up structure and order for you so you can start to see some of the things that is causing the problems in your life. So that's how it works for us.
All right. I think that was great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You did a great job.
Welcome. You guys make it easy, really.
I think you make it easy, let's be honest.